bigtincan is the world's leading sales learning and enablement platform that delivers the onboarding and training, preparation, coaching, customer engagement, and follow-up and insights that modern businesses need to win.
Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why and how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for lending me those beautiful ears if you're watching this on video. I appreciate your eyeballs as well. Today, we go all the way down under, straight to the Rockies of Colorado to find you somebody who understands selling, but more important, story selling and sales leadership. Please help me welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, Bernadette McClelland. What's happening, Bernadette?
Hey, good to be here. Good to be here on your show, and even better to be here in the USA. So,
there you go. By the way, give the folks a little bit of your quick history of who you are, why sales, and where you're at right now.
Yeah, good question. A number of years ago now, I'm not going to tell you how many, I decided I was one of those people that put their hand up and said, hey, I want to be in sales. And I was working at a little company you might have heard of, Xerox, and was their sales coordinator, and they were advertising for sales trainees. So I put my hand up and they said to me, sorry, you don't have what it takes. You're not aggressive enough. You're too nice. And,
okay.
If you know me, being told that you can't do something, especially in a sales environment, is like a red rag to a bull. So I marched down this long corridor from the sales floor to the leadership team, and I knocked on the managing director's door, and he's sitting there, and there's behind this big mahogany desk and this big brown leather chair, and he's twirling his handlebar moustache, and he says, what do you want? And I didn't even sit down. I went in and I explained to him via a story why I was the best person for the job. And he pushed his chair back, put his hands up, and he said, you've got it. So 20 years later, I left that company as one of the senior sales executives. And the reason why I figured I worked my way up was because of the power of understanding the psychology of people and also bringing story into a sales narrative. So that was my background, and then I went out on my own, a number of years ago now, and doing sales leadership and speaking. And then last year, I made the biggest sale of my life, and that was to the United States Immigration Department, and I got my green card. So my green card enables me to bring into the United States of America some economic value, and here I am with you.
There it is. Economic. So you're an EVA official now at it. Economic value add to the United States. EVA in the USA. I think you should plaster that somewhere. I don't know. But I love that history. I gotta ask you. So two things came to mind when you were talking about your history there. Tell me about Xerox. I mean, Xerox, for those who know, back in the day was like the premier company. It was at the forefront of sales training and new development of sales. Talk to me a little bit about that and how that helped develop you into the salesperson you are today.
Oh, look, I would categorically, I was so fortunate. The level of training that we had, kicking off with, professional selling skills, and then spin selling and solution selling. And of course, that whole transition from analog to digital. So it's not just understanding how to sell, but there was this whole other component in it, which was how do we start to have different conversations with our buyers who are in this analog mindset, which we all were, and how do we transition them to a digital mindset, which was just such a huge paradigm shift for all of us. And so the level of training that we had in that was a 12-month program that was really was called Your License to Sell. So at the end of that program, which brought in IT and sales and all of those components, you had to go through a series of exams and role plays and demonstration techniques, and it was a national thing. And so that I topped the country. That was just absolutely invaluable. I was so fortunate.
It's amazing how, like, that's an investment. And that's a
Mm.
long-term investment, 12 months. When you look at the market today, you talk to different companies, you work with different companies, especially on the leadership side as well. What do you see, like the difference in the commitment to sales training? Then you've explained that. But compared to now, what are some of the differences you see or similarities?
Um, and once again, it depends on who it is that you're talking to. There is a real mixed bag, and it's interesting because back in Australia, and I mean I've only been over here now a matter of 7 weeks, 7 8 weeks. Um, I was a member of the CEO Institute, so not only was I a syndicate member, but I also spoke to different syndicates and different levels of CEO. The sub 2 million, the 5 million rather, and up to whatever. There is a mindset in Australia anyway, and I am actually finding a difference here in these short few weeks. I am finding and seeing a cultural difference in the way that leaders embrace investing in their people. So what I've seen is some leaders still think sales training is just a flash in the pan. And it's going to be teaching their salespeople, or not teaching their salespeople enough, not enough ROI. Then there are those who embrace it. And it's the growth mindset. It's those growth focused sales leaders that I just love working with, because you can really get down and dirty with them, and you can kind of start to talk about what is preventing the behaviors that are stopping the results, because we know that it's the behaviors that stop the activity. And just different mindsets, I guess. Some people still think of the psychology, whether it's story selling, storytelling, whether it's vulnerability, whether it's intuition, bringing intuition into business.
Sure.
It's still seen as fluffy.
But on the yeah, that's funny. It is fluffy. It's really they don't view it as tangible. I do. You highlighted some differences when you came here. You said you're starting to see some cultural differences here towards sales. Can you be more specific? Like, give
Yeah.
me something tangible.
Yeah. So keeping in mind, this is only simply brand new.
That's okay. By the way, this is
There, yeah.
but here's why. Here, and let me just pause you for a second. Here's why I think this is very valuable for our listeners and watchers, is because you've come from another culture. Well, I mean, we're not that different, right? Aussies to here, right? But nonetheless, you're bringing a fresh perspective. You're kind of brand new to the U.S., so to speak, right? And so now's the time to get this fresh perspective before you're tainted. So that's what I want from you.
Yeah, got it. So, the people that I've been having conversations with, first and foremost, there is every single person that I speak to in relation to what I'm doing, and having those networking meetings and those initial discussions are so open. How can I help you? Now, I think that's an American thing. We don't get that in Australia. And this podcast isn't about the difference between Australia and New Zealand.
No, but I want you to talk about it, because I think there's also bad habits that some Americans may have. So now juxtapose that with, by the way, we're not beating up on Australia. That's
No,
not the intent.
not at all.
It's really just to say, what are some of the differences? So if they're open here, what do you see in Australia? Give me some examples of, like, give me a scenario. Here's what happened here when I came to the US. Here's what would have happened if I was doing this in Australia.
Yeah. So follow up. So I'm getting people following me up and wanting to take the conversation further. Now, I don't think much has changed between me. Potentially it's my message, story selling. Now there you go. That's a really important point, is that in Australia, I was pretty much a generalist. Okay, so this is my thinking here now, and this will potentially help some of our colleagues or other people out there. Is in Australia, I was very much a generalist, helping manufacturing companies to build their revenues and to create sales-centric cultures. So very, very much that way, very much manufacturing based. Now, there's a different demographic than tech. So there's a different thinking, a thought process there, and then again, I'm over here, there's a lot of tech communications companies, but also another subset, which is fractional, VP sales, fractional, interim sales leaders. Now that's a
By the
big,
way, I know what fractional is, but go ahead and explain fractional to the folks who may not know what it
yeah,
is.
good. Yeah, thank you. So, and before I do, that is not a big thing in Australia. It's there, but it's not a big thing. So that's a difference that I've seen. So a fractional interim sales leader can be somebody who comes in perhaps to an existing business where their leaders, no longer there, and somebody needs some guidance quickly from a sales function perspective. Or more commonly, it's for those startups or founders that have got to the point where they're needing a sales leader, but they perhaps don't warrant a full-time one.
Correct.
So that's what, we call an interim or a fractional sales leader. Now,
By the way, I just want to put a note, just a little note for future reference, that maybe in the future, you and I should have another conversation on the pros and cons of being a fractional VP or president of sales. That would be an interesting conversation, but
we
for another
could.
day.
We
But
could.
for another day.
We
So,
could. Yeah.
so one of the differences was in people were more open. The follow up was there. Now, when you said you were a generalist down in
Mm-hmm.
Australia, was that because you marketed yourself as a generalist, or it was because, I mean, what happened that you came here and now you're seen differently? What did you do, or what
Yeah.
did you
Yeah, great question. So it actually all started at Outbound Down Under. So, so last year, Outbound, with COVID, I couldn't travel to Atlanta for the face-to-face conference. So Jeb and Anthony, they put it out to me. They said, how about we have an Outbound Down Under? So I grabbed a couple of key speakers or key experts in their space in Australia, and we live streamed. We
do?
hired a TV studio and we live streamed. Now, one of those speakers is a guy called Mike Adams.
Okay, now hold that thought. I just clarify for my viewers or watchers. Now, Down Under is that we have an outbound conference. So go to outboundconference.com. That's where we'll be speaking at in September. And Bernadette is referring to last year. She couldn't make it. She couldn't travel. So Anthony and Jeb created, by the way, the two founders of Outbound Conference said, hey, let's do this thing called Outbound Down Under, and you can just record from there or film it from there.
Yeah.
And that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Mike Adams and Mike wrote 7 stories every salesperson
I read the
knows.
book. Great book, by the way. Great book.
Great book, really great book. So that's
Big shout out to Mike Adams.
yeah. Well, we had lunch afterwards, and Mike says to me, Bernadette, you are a natural storyteller. And he said, have you considered, joining the Anecdote team, which is the company that, that he's a partner with, as one of our facilitators? And so I jumped at the chance. So that was part one, and worked with Mike on, we had a couple of cohorts, and we've won a large global telecommunications deal, if you like. So we're working with their sales team globally. So my move to America was in the pipeline way before this. And so I've landed here, and I love bringing in the concept of story, not just storytelling, but story selling. And the guys at Anecdote, we had a conversation. And so they have offered me to be the US partner for Anecdote. And so what that means...
Congratulations, by the way. Congratulations.
Thank you. And so aligned with me, Victor. And so I just feel I just know that businesses out there today are wanting more than just the same old. And, we can dress up generalized sales training, which is, how to open the deal and how to close the deal. Nothing wrong with that. There's 0 things wrong with existing sales methodology.
You still need it. You still need it.
Absolutely.
But I'm finding it interesting that, because of this conversation with Mike Adams after the Outbound Down Under, that, now you make a move here, but now you're marketing yourself probably differently.
Yes.
Is that a true statement?
It is. And I think somebody referred to me as the story seller from Down Under. And I kind of like that moniker.
Okay. I like it. I like it. So
Yeah.
now, so that's one of the reasons I think, and there's something to what you're saying, I think, is because you can try to master all of selling, but it becomes very difficult. I think what people are looking for is specific solutions sometimes. It's like, I don't think they want the toolbox. Sometimes they say, I just need somebody who knows how to work a screwdriver. In this case,
Yeah.
the screwdriver could be the story selling piece, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so tell me about that so far. I mean, how's that going? What are you finding?
Yeah, people are loving a couple of things. So, when I, it's actually quite funny because when you bring story into the sales conversation, some people will think it's about branding and marketing. And I had somebody say, "Oh, great! I know somebody who wants to write a book. Perhaps you can help them." I think, whoa, 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 hang on a second. So, story selling is kind of how I'm marketing it, and it's kind of like a three-legged stool. Okay, you need three legs or the stool's going to fall over. And so I'm of the understanding that there are three components to story selling. The first component is the story that you tell yourself about
Right.
your buyer. The second is the stories you tell your buyer. And then the third, which is where things are so often missed, are the stories that your buyer needs to tell you.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. So let's walk through those. I find that fascinating.
Yeah.
Rarely does somebody throw me a curveball, but that was a nice little curveball. I like that. And so the first one, let's start with the first one, is the story you tell yourself
Yeah.
about your customer.
Yeah.
So as I say, unpack that a little bit for me, and frame it so it'll benefit the listeners and the viewers.
So, you know, any great salesperson knows that mindset and psychology drives us. And so when we need to pick up the phone, or when we need to speak to a C-level decision maker, when we're faced with an objection, when we need to discuss money, when someone doesn't ring us back, all of these things are little things that tap our brain. And we tell ourselves stories. And so you can call that beliefs, you can call it, anything that you want, but it's a story. And so, part of what I teach or, share is unpacking some of those stories. Beliefs around money need to be, liked by our buyers.
This is like, Bernadette, I like the other 2 points, but this to me is foundational. That if you
Totally,
can't get past this one,
totally foundational. Totally. I mean,
and I love, go ahead, I'm sorry, because I'm
yeah,
excited because I love your topic. Go ahead, go ahead.
yeah. I mean, seriously, you think about money, and you think, a salesperson's in a negotiation, and there's always going to be the money somewhere. There's always going to be in some way, shape, or form. That comes from us being kids.
Right.
I remember standing with my dad and my uncle, and I was only about 12 or 13, and they were having some kind of conversation. I cannot remember what they were talking about, but I remember saying to my uncle, "Uncle Andrew, how much do you get paid?" And my dad pulled me aside and he said, "Don't you
Never ask that,
ever
Bernadette.
ask
I
anyone
can,
what they get paid or
I can see your father scolding you, Bernadette.
who they vote for."
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So,
But
but
that's interesting, right? We don't ask money, so that kind of is programmed into us.
exactly.
That's yeah, and there's so many of these little, and I'll couch it in what you said. These little stories that are tapping our brain, as you say,
Yeah.
and it's really understanding that. Correct?
Yeah, totally, totally. And sometimes it's just the awareness is enough to go, "Oh, heck." For me, it was, because, when I started to unpack all of this stuff, and apply it to, and reflect on myself. And
Hmm.
I reflected back, to my days as a Xerox salesperson. I always made my revenue, but, back in the days of Par Club and President's Club, and there were usually gates that you had to get as well as your revenue.
Sure.
And I missed out on so many incentives because I could never sell the big kit because in my mind, I thought it was too expensive.
Right.
So why would I? So all of this stuff,
You were, as I always say, you were buying with your pocket, not theirs,
Yeah.
which was a big mistake to make. I got to ask you this because I think this is, I'll forget the thought. So I apologize for interrupting a bit, but you got me excited here. Um, you talked about awareness. The first step is awareness. So let's just fast forward for the audience here and just say they get it. They have stories. They really need to work on these stories. So the step one, let's help them a little bit. The first step is awareness, right? I become aware that, I'm really worried about how I was raised with money, for example, using that one. That's why I hate talking about money. So step one, it's almost like, an intervention, right? Step one, become aware. What are the second or third steps for somebody to really begin to turn it around?
Okay. Okay. So, number one, and I'm just kind of off the top of my head here, is to realize, is to think of, say, like $1,000 or $100 note. Okay, grab $100 note. And what would you do with that $100 note? Now, you might buy you won't get much shoes for $100, but, pay a bill or, buy a coffee, whatever it is. But behind that, there's emotion. And so the awareness is, number one, is recognizing that money is linked to emotion. So how can you treat money like a loaf of bread? Yeah, it means nothing. It's a loaf of bread. Second is start to talk about money more. Women.
So let me point. So the first one is to detach the emotion from money.
Yeah.
Just detach it and almost become agnostic or apathetic
Yeah.
of any emotional content in that money.
Yeah.
It's paper. Okay. It's fiat currency that we use to exchange goods.
Exactly.
Bam. All right.
Now that might take a little bit of time to internalize that. To help you do that is to start talking about money more openly. Open those window-faced envelopes. Don't shove them in the drawer until you get your reminder notice.
How about with, I love where you're going with this. Let's start talking about money, because when you start talking about money, it's like you demystify it.
Yeah.
Right? You just demystify it. So when you say talk about money, let's go back to the situation where I'm a salesperson. I'm afraid to bring up money or whatever. I think it's too expensive. As you said, I didn't sell this because I thought it was too expensive. So how does that conversation go about me talking about money?
So from your so we're moving now to the deal, or we're talking.
So first of all, I become aware that I'm afraid to talk about money because I'm buying other people's stuff with my pocket, not theirs. And then now you say, well, let's talk. You should just talk about money, right? Kind of desensitize yourself.
No, I'm talk about money openly at home. So sometimes people will tell fibs about money. They might just say, look, I got this on special, or, you're kind of bringing that kind of part of conversation in. I'm talking about personally here. And the third way to think about it also is to start to add another zero to the end of what you think a lot of money is. Because if you think a lot of money is $100 and you're selling something for $1,000, there's going to be a total disconnect and you're going to feel totally uncomfortable. So yeah, so it's a learned thing. It's not something that you can just, maybe some people can just go like that, but for most people, it's a learned thing. And this is the entire part about awareness.
Yeah. And by the way, it's how do you unlearn that? It's kind of what you're walking us through the process here. How do you unlearn to be afraid to talk about money, for example,
Yeah.
or whatever other issue you might be having? Fair statement?
Yeah, so start once again, it comes back to the story that you tell yourself. How can you flip the script? How can you start to change,
By the way, I have an example for you. I want you to analyze this example because I thought it was interesting because it's along this topic. And I was training a pool company, like swimming pools, right? And one of the salesperson, we talked about, be a product of the product. In other words, own the product.
Yeah.
And then you'll be able to sell the product more effectively. And he says, well, Victor, I live in an apartment. It doesn't have a pool, right? And that was his hiccup. He goes, well, I don't have a pool. How can I sell this? Plus, I can't even afford a pool. That was his mindset. I don't have one and I can't afford one. And I said, do you know somebody who has a pool? I said, go jump in that pool and then go enjoy somebody's pool. I said, number two, you don't have to be able to afford the pool. Your job is to bring the vision of the pool to the client. It's not about affording it. And so break that apart for me, how you can actually, because you said something interesting. It's how do you shift their paradigm, right? How do you reframe it for them? And what do you
Exactly.
do to reframe people?
Exactly. And if you think about, and we're still kind of in this line of story because that is a story that salesperson has. Now, that,
Absolutely.
you know, when we've started selling anything, we take the whole sales scenario. Do you need to own the pool? No, you could be a reporter type person.
Correct.
You don't have to be a user. You don't have to be a user.
By the way, that concept right there is so valuable. That be a reporter. If you're not doing it, be a reporter. Report on that. I don't want people to just let that go by like you just said it like a flippant statement. There is power behind what you just said in that concept. That if you treat yourself as a reporter, then you have a totally different perspective.
And then you can move into the second part of what I have my stool is the storytelling. And what are the stories you're telling your buyer? Now, that is a classic example of, sharing could potentially be a success story of one of your colleagues who has a pool.
Right.
And so, you're able to bring in that homeowners challenge that they were having, who they were, the challenge that they were having, how they met you through your friend, how you worked together on a plan together. But hang on, whoops, there was a little bit of a hiccup along the way because the buyer said, well, you know what, you don't have a pool. But we got over that together because of what we did together and collaborated. And now he's bought the pool and I'm enjoying swimming in it.
Yeah. No,
So,
I love the way you're setting this up. I think it's beautiful because it's like first you're saying about it's the story you tell yourselves that will determine whether you can be successful or not. Foundational. Now you said, okay, now how do we reframe the story, even if we have some deficits? Because a lot of people have like imposter syndrome, right? That's kind of a
yes,
variant of it, right? They
yes,
feel like, oh, I don't have one. I'm an imposter. Well, remember, you're not supposed to own the pool. You're supposed to be able to sell the vision of the pool and what it can do for the customer.
correct.
And so I love where you're going with that.
Big Tin Can is the world's leading sales learning and enablement platform that delivers the onboarding and training, preparation, coaching, customer engagement, and follow-up and insights that modern businesses need to win.
So what is the third step again? Because I thought the third one was also interesting.
So the third step are the stories that you need to elicit from your buyer in order to complete, I guess, the entire sales narrative and to really set yourself up with as much data. So we're talking storytelling, but we're also talking data to bring up enough data to complete a proposal that is just so aligned and sign the deal. And so that part of it are how do you elicit the right stories? How do you know what those stories are? Mm-hmm. Well, the best way that we can help our buyers tell their story is to ask questions.
Interview them. Be a reporter. Interview them, right?
Yeah, totally. And do it in a way that allows them to do the heavy lifting. Mm-hmm. Because the number one topic is on the planet, always will be, it has been forever, me. So your buyers, given the right questions, will naturally share their answers, which is their story.
I agree. By the way, two things. One, I love the way you say data, not data. This sounds more elegant when you say it. The other thing is that when I look at that third leg, immediately what came to mind was almost like a not so much a process as a cycle, a feedback loop. So because when the customer starts, you elicit those stories from the customers. Well, that feeds into the first leg, which is the stories you tell yourself about your clients, right? And the more positive you hear, the more positive you actually imbue within yourself. And then obviously move to leg number 2, where you tell stories.
Yeah, and interestingly, when you are asking the right questions, that enable your client to share more information with you, you're also not just hearing their stories about their business, but done the right way, you're also going to hear their stories they're telling themselves about you,
Correct. Which reinforces
which
their belief
are
system about you.
which are commonly referred to as objections. And they're simply stories that that buyer is telling you about you, your product, your market, your business, whatever it may be. And how do most salespeople react to objections? They do two things, one of two things. They'll either agree, yes, you are right, Mr. Customer, and completely walk away and lose out because they don't know how to kind of come back or how to push back or anything like that. Or the second is they will justify and defend, and that's never going to work either.
Correct.
So, we have all of these great hacks and these great, shortcuts that the gurus tell us, answer an objection with these words or whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, you're still doing all the telling. And so what we need to do, the only way, and this is what we say, is that the only way that you can beat an objection or an anti-story is with a better story.
Correct.
And and so that's where that whole kind of loop kind of closes off.
Yeah, I love that. I love it when you elicit every time I elicit information from a customer, it's always interesting. What I thought was important, they didn't find that important.
Yeah.
And then what I thought was just throwaway material, comments, statements. They're like, Victor, that really resonated with me. I'm like that. Even when you're on the stage, right? I'm sure that, you think the audience is going to react this way to whatever story you're going to tell. Nothing. And then you tell some dumb anecdote. They're like, oh my God, that was the most brilliant thing. It really shifted my paradigm. So it's almost like the box of chocolate thing.
You never know what you're going to get. Exactly. But this is, and this as well, is the shortest way, the shortest distance between two people is a story. And, when we can,
Visual.
What was that?
We're very visual, aren't we?
We are.
We're very visual, and that's what the power stories do.
Yeah.
But I think you're underselling yourself, because I love your 3-part method, which I think is brilliant already. But you, for example, just in telling your stories to me, is that you have a certain cadence, tone, descriptor, so forth, and that also requires a certain skill set. And how did you develop your skill set? I mean, was it just developed over time, or did you consciously say, you know what, I got to get better at this?
It's interesting. You've heard of Anthony Robbins?
Barely, yes.
So I was asked to speak at his Unleash the Power Within.
Hey, wait a minute. You got a nice comment on your website from Tony Robbins. You got a nice, beautiful quote in there. Yeah. So you got a high five from Tony Robbins. Wow. See, I read your stuff.
Well, I was asked to speak at Unleash the Power Within in Sydney, and so I had been a coach. I had been a client and was being coached, and so they asked me to speak for this breakout session, and so I did, and really what they wanted was just share your experience as a client, and so I got up there and I just did a 45-minute keynote. And unbeknownst to me, nearly 40% of the room converted to coaching. So that was a record. And so off the back of that, they wanted to send me to London and San Jose. However, someone came back and said to me, Bernadette, can you tell us the cadence? Can you tell us the, what's the word? I can't remember the word. Syntax of your speech. And I'm thinking, what's a syntax? I got no idea what a syntax means. So I couldn't answer that question. I just said, well, I just told my story. Now, a couple of months ago, I had a conversation with the CEO of Anecdote, and he asked me the same question. He said, do you think people have a genetic disposition to be storytellers? Or what makes a good storyteller? He said, what was your history? What's your family background? And I said, well, Irish. I said, my grandmother used to read the tea leaves. I said, so I don't know, maybe there's something in me that's a natural storyteller. However, I then
From Ireland?
started,
By the way, if you're Irish, yeah, you got
yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah.
By the way, I get teary-eyed at Old Danny Boy and Bayam Bonnie Braes. Just letting you know. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
But I've started working with technical CTOs
Hmm.
in telecommunications field, and these guys are, they sit there like this, they're thinking stories, fluff, all the rest of it. We're data driven, we're logical. Don't know if this is going to work. At the
Yeah.
end of this, our program, they actually have the best storytelling because there is structure. There is a process, there is a framework. And so these left brain thinkers, and I'm just using that word loosely,
Mhm.
these left brain thinkers that are very process focused have the ability, because we've
Very
all
much.
got stories in us.
By the way,
They
I
have the
can't. The reason I'm affirming what you said is I came from the telecom space,
right.
and
There you
and
go.
so and so you're right. They're left brain thinkers, but they're great storytellers.
Totally, totally. And when they feel comfortable enough that there is a structure, they follow it, and they just I say there's a framework, and just dance within the framework. Be yourself and just dance within the framework.
I love that.
And and
I
they
love that.
that's what they do. And so, can it be taught? Yes. Is it inherent in all of us? Yes. And for probably half the population, it has been suppressed for whatever reason. So
I
that's
think I, thi-
why
I think I would agree with you. I think everybody has storytelling abilities. I think there's this misperception, if that's the word, that you have to be a storyteller. You have to be very animated. You have to be very this. You have to be no.
no,
Everybody tells their story their own way,
correct,
and it's really the context and I'll just say the authentic delivery of that
correct.
storyline that makes a great story.
Absolutely. And that's that connection in business, so long as it's got a business point.
Correct.
So there are some little nuances along the way to help, like always you don't have to be this dramatic Star Wars. It's not about big
Yeah.
stories. It's about little anecdotes as well.
I've
So
got some, since like you, I've shared the stage with, a couple of speakers, and it's always amazing to me the audience's reaction to a story that I would be like, meh, I'd be like, meh, that's a yeah, interesting story. But then people in the audience are like, oh my God, that story was so powerful. And it really taught me that, you shouldn't project what you think. Let the audience tell you what you should think about that story, because that's the only way to test it, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah. And
I love that. I got to ask you something, Bernadette, 'cause I'll be, and you can not answer this or choose not to answer this, but I would love your perspective if you would share it. As a woman in sales, you've been around from, let's just say a few years back,
Yep.
and then we can fast forward to today. What are some of the changes? What are some of the positives, negatives, whatever I mean, give me your perspective on what do you think has changed? Because I'll give you my brief history is that I worked with a lot of sales women in the past. We're talking 10, 20 years ago. And there were a lot of badasses back then. I'm sure there's a lot of badasses today. But I just want to hear your perspective because obviously I'm not a woman, so I don't know what that is.
So yes, it's certainly changed, and I'm going to say for the better. And yeah, there's some areas that were really good back then, and so I think
Lay it on me, Bernadette. Lay it on me. Don't
lay
hold
it
back
on.
now.
Yeah,
Come on,
here we
let's
go.
go.
So I'm going to come from a different perspective, couple of different perspectives. One, I was a single mum
Hmm.
for a chunk of time, and my daughter was like only one, so that was really difficult. Then back then, so we are talking a few years back, it was really important. Well, it wasn't. No, important wasn't the right word. It was commonplace for the women to feel that they needed to be one of the boys.
Hmm.
Okay, so that was that. I don't see that anymore. I see even just to the way we dressed, the black suit with the white shirt, so it was we were very, I guess, masculine, the masculine energy.
You were trying to fit in.
Totally. And so,
You're trying to fit in. Okay. Be one
yeah,
of the boys, dress like the boys, hang with the boys, speak like the boys.
exactly. Drink like the boys, all of that kind of that culture. Hey, I'm calling it
By the way,
as
the
I'm calling
Irish
it
side of
as
you
it
just
is.
came out. You hear me? The Irish side of you just came out. I heard that. Go ahead.
And so so there's that shift that I've seen happen. And I think also political correctness, I think is, how can I say this without it being taken the wrong way? I'm pretty real, and I think sometimes political correctness can be taken too far,
Sure.
to the detriment of connection. I know that sounds really weird, but
Oh, I think you, what's the word I'm looking for? You not ostracize yourself, but you set yourself apart because I think it has gone too far. That's another discussion. But I know what you mean, though. I mean, you know what? You're trying. I guess we're always trying to find that balance, right?
yeah, yeah,
And that's what we're always looking for. What I noticed, is that you're so right. I never really thought about that. Women tried to fit in more.
yeah.
Today, I don't see that as much. But I also think that, let me defend the men for a second here. That men have come around also.
I think so too. I
They
do.
and I don't think they're given enough credit for that. That they've kind of like, okay, let's not be idiots here because women can sell just as well, if not better than men, depending on the situation. I don't like saying one is better than the other. I think that's always a stupid thing to say because it's all context based, right? But I think men have come around, and sometimes I wish in this society we would applaud the transformations and the gradual changes, whether it's men or whoever, these changes. We never do that, right? We always keep focusing on how it used to be or the negatives. So I think we've seen men come around and go, you know what? Yeah, I kind of like these ladies.
And the thing
You know,
is, though, here's the thing: is that the guys today who are senior managers, you know, that potentially could be blocking the women. Okay,
hmm
they're probably baby boomer age. They
hmm
were the ones that were on the sales floor we were with 20 years ago.
right.
So there's mindsets there as well. We've got the young ones coming up now that are really, I think, more open-minded. I
Oh
think
yeah.
they're so much more inclusive, and I think that they've grown up with working mums. So
We're
there's
seeing this gradual, yeah, you're describing this gradual shift,
yeah,
and it's almost like plate tectonics. A lot of plates are moving,
totally.
and I think they're settling into a better place.
And I and
You know,
I also think social media has contributed to that as well. I mean, and
how so?
huh?
How so? How so?
By people sharing, stories, of teammates and awards and women in sales and Laurie
hmm
Richardson does an amazing job at elevating. Cynthia does. Barnes does an amazing job with elevating women in the sales space. So we're starting to see that narrative.
I got to ask you this question because it's a burning question I have. The I don't know how I feel about this, so I'm hoping you can guide me and to clarify my thoughts. But I don't like drawing lines. That's always been my thing. I don't like drawing lines. I think we're all human beings, type of thing, right? But every time I see like women in sales, you know, I always think, I said, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? I don't like it. I got to be honest, I don't like it. Because I think if we start creating, then we create men in sales. You know what I mean? It's just like,
I
okay, another line
I
is drawn.
agree. I agree with you and understand where you're coming from there. And I've thought about that as well. I remember Jill Conrath. Jill Conrath, the amazing Jill
Oh, Jill
Conrath.
Conrad's awesome. By the way, one of her Selling to Big Companies is one of the first sales books I read. And I thought that's a fantastic book. Still, I think a great book.
Oh, totally,
Big shout out
absolutely
to
love it.
Jill.
Well, she said to me a number of years ago, I was at a conference over here, and I said something to her about being wanting to be Australia's leading female in sales or whatever it was, and she
Mhm.
looked at me and she said, "Why female?"
Yeah,
And
Okay,
I thought, wow. And so what I think with all
Me and
these,
Jill are like
yeah,
this. Me and Jill are like this because I'm like, I hate to say, it, but just be a badass.
yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean? And because I got to tell you this quick story. There was a sales lady, and I don't think she'll mind me mentioning her name. Her name was Linda Sweet, telecom, technology sales, just killer lady. I mean, just everything. If you say, show me the ideal saleswoman, I'm like, bam, there she is. And she was doing this, let's say, 20 years ago, easy. And what I've always loved about her was that she held her own. Like, and I just like, oh, and to me, she was like I'll say my role model, that she really showed me that, this is how you become a strong salesperson, not a strong woman in sales, a strong salesperson. And man, she commanded respect when she walked into a room,
yeah,
literally.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So when I hear women in sales, I'm like, oh, that's just
I
me though.
think it. So I guess I'm part of this wonderful network of women, and we're a great sounding board for each
I
other
understand.
about business. But I think that will. I think that's almost like the line in the sand, the stake in the ground that says, you know what. We are going to do something, but I think that will fade out. I think that's part of the tectonic plates.
Sure.
I think that will fade out, and it will all just merge in as we evolve, I guess, as a profession, or a community.
Yeah, I mean, even it happened for me. Just it's not just the women in sales. My background is family's from Puerto Rico, so I'm Hispanic, right? And years ago, I said, no, I don't want to be a Hispanic speaker or a Hispanic sales trainer. No, we're not drawing lines. In this case, we're Americans. Okay, that's the only moniker I want. And then we're whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just thought that, and so it's a philosophy I've been living by. So every time I see people balkanize by drawing lines and creating cohorts and groups, I go, I think we don't want to do that. I'm all about erasing lines
Yeah, I
so
like
that
that.
we all become,
Or,
yeah, on the same playing
or
field.
coloring outside the lines.
There you go. Take your pick. Take whatever analogy you want. See, you're good at that. But thank you for that perspective because I think I've also too seen a change. Like I said, I've seen a change in men, but I've also seen that women are more confident. They're not trying to fit in anymore,
I agree.
right?
I
And
agree.
I also think because I think women are now getting more, I think engineering or technical degrees. I think I'm right, than men are. And so you're starting to see a lot of women in tech more than usual, more than in the past, I should say. And I think that's a plus as well.
Yeah, it's like it's ever evolving, isn't it? Like I mean, it's. I think we're
I
in
think we
really
need
fun
that.
times. I think I,
Well, I think if you look at a lot of the issues that are out there today, like like paternity leave, right? Stay-at-home moms are now getting more respect, even stay-at-home dads. But I love I think I love the infusion of the feminine side, if I could say it, in the
yeah,
business.
yeah.
The yin and the yang, and I love that blend. Always trying to find the right balance, but I love that blend. And I think, like when more women like yourself, in positions of prominence where people see you and they go, oh, there's the role model I'm looking for, because everybody wants a role model, right?
Yep,
And so I'm
totally.
sure when people look at you, do you have a story, by the way, of somebody who somebody you inspired, some young lady, could be a young man also, somebody you inspired? Give me let's wrap with that one. Give me an inspirational story here.
Oh my God.
I'm totally putting you on the spot. Totally putting you on the spot. Told you not to come on this podcast. I warned you about this podcast.
You know, oh my gosh, you have put me on the spot. You know, I had somebody reach out to my husband and I, and so it was to me, but it was to Tim and I, and you know, I make no bones about this. I've shared it in relevant situations. It's not something I go around beating the drum about. But my husband and I went bankrupt 10 years ago. So we were on welfare. I had an accident we had a importing business and a wholesale business, and I had a forklift accident of all things. And they put me on penicillin for 3 days and it shut my liver down. So I was in bed for all of 2009, and as a result of that, nobody was at the driver's seat of the business. We lost our houses. We were completely bankrupt and on welfare. And so I share that story. In Australia, we have a day a year called Are You OK Day, and it is all around mental health. And so we shared that story, not for the sake of sharing it, but shared how we kind of came out of it and got ourselves back on the horse again. And so I had two, it was actually written up in the Australian Financial Review. There was an article on us. And so I had two people separately over a period of time come back and say that one of them was, it had changed their complete outlook on their life. And the other one helped with their business and getting them back up on the horse. So I think the reason why I'm sharing that story, the point behind that, is that we've all had experiences that have taken us down and just as equally brought us back up. And I think it's a responsibility that we all have. In most cases, a privileged responsibility to actually share that story in the right context at the right time with the right people. And just, I guess, inspire means to breathe life into. And so, for you to share an inspirational story, so long as it's breathing life into somebody's ideas or thinking or being, then that's behind why I share some of those stories.
Oh, I love that story. I got the chills a little bit because it's one of those things where I'm tired of social media always projecting the ideal life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Everything's
Yeah.
perfect. And, maybe people look at you and just say, oh my God, Bernadette just has it all, right? Without realizing it, that all of us, I got my stories too,
Yeah.
but we all have stories of hardship and we have the go down and the come up stories.
Yeah.
And so I think, when you share that story, people go, oh, okay, she did it.
Yeah.
Maybe I can also. And I love that. And by the way, you know what I really like what you also said? The mental health day, are you okay day? I'm not usually a fan of, these label days, but I think I'm a fan of that one. Like, are you okay day? I
Yeah.
think I like that one
Yeah.
because I think it's almost like a mental check-in with people, right? Are you
Yeah.
okay today?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally, totally. And I think through COVID as well, coming back, kind of probably tying a few little things in here as well, as I think that we've seen a different side to people. We're seeing more vulnerability. We're seeing more stories shared. We've seen inside people's homes. We've by default met their kids, even if they're just sitting doing something under the table next to this, our client. We're really, I think the barriers have dropped. And coming back to your point before about some of the shifts and some of the changes, I'm seeing people being more I hate using the word more authentic. I don't like using more authentic because we already are authentic, right? We already are authentic, so we don't need to become authentic because we are authentic. We've just layered.
By the way, I think we would disagree on that because I'm thinking some people try not to be authentic and try to be
Oh,
something else. But I understand the spirit of what you're saying,
yeah,
and that is that we're seeing more of the true person.
yeah. The layers are being stripped away. That
Yeah.
inauthenticity is being stripped away. So we're beginning to see
Yes.
the authentic person.
That's I would agree with that. That
Yeah,
the inauthentic layers are being peeled back. Sometimes you're starting to see it,
yeah,
and then you see people for who they are,
yeah.
and then you realize they're just like us.
Exactly.
They're just like us.
So,
They're just like us.
salespeople, those CEOs that you are so scared to contact, they got kids hanging around their feet screaming at them on the weekend, just like you. So, we are all the
Just like
same,
you.
we're just different.
That's all. And by the way, I think that's a great note to end it on to give them confidence in selling. If you just treat them like people, because I found this to be true, you tell me if you found this also, is that when I treat an executive like a human being, with the respect of the title that they deserve,
Yep.
of course, but just treat them like an individual, just like you, it's always an easier conversation. Have you found that to be true?
Absolutely. And then that's you. It's all about you. If you're thinking different, it's about you. It's not about them.
There you go. Oh my God, there you go. She dropped that one at the end. There you go. Take that. Take that. Anyway, Bernadette, do several things. Close us out by telling us about Outbound. You're going to be there, and then where they can find out more about your wonderful self.
Yeah, I cannot wait for Outbound. So I'll be there sharing 3 different virtual, breakout, and main stage. So I cannot wait to share some more ideas with you guys. Look, connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. And BernadetteMcClelland.com is my website where you can find out all these amazing things about story selling.
I love it. You have a great website, by the way. And Bernadette, I thank you for being on the Sales Influence podcast. Thank you very much. And on that note, this is Victor Antonio saying, check out Bernadette McClelland's website at BernadetteMcClelland.com. And after you do that, go to SalesVelocityAcademy.com. Got new courses to help you sell more faster. And on that note, this is Victor Antonio, always reminding you, selling ain't hard when you have a good story and you know how to tell it and you know how. Take care.
bigtincan is the world's leading sales learning and enablement platform that delivers the onboarding and training, preparation, coaching, customer engagement, and follow-up and insights that modern businesses need to win.